Mark Carney flips out. Melanie Joly just destroyed. Best deal in the world. In the spring of 2025, Canada found itself at a pivotal juncture in its political and economic landscape. The resignation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, following a series of controversies and declining public support, set the stage for an unprecedented shift. Mark Carney, a former governor of the Bank of Canada and UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance, stepped into the leadership role during a time characterized by heightened economic uncertainty and strained relations with the United States, particularly under President Donald Trump's administration. Carney's ascent to power signaled a departure from the policies of the previous Liberal government and raised expectations for a new direction. One of Carney's first acts as Prime Minister was to eliminate the federal consumer carbon tax, a controversial move that sparked significant debate. Introduced during Trudeau's tenure to combat climate change, the tax had grown unpopular, especially as living costs rose. Many Canadians viewed it as a financial burden on lower and middle-income households. Carney contended that the tax hindered economic growth and added strain to families. His decision faced immediate backlash from environmental groups and some provinces, who claimed it undermined Canada's climate commitments. Nonetheless, Carney emphasized the need to balance environmental goals with economic realities. In light of the economic pressures exacerbated by U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, Carney introduced a comprehensive Buy Canadian initiative aimed at bolstering the domestic economy. This policy sought to reduce Canada's reliance on the U.S. market and strengthen its own industries by mandating that federal agencies prioritize Canadian suppliers in procurement processes. The initiative included a substantial $5 billion Canadian strategic response fund to support businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, that were adversely affected by U.S. tariffs. This approach was seen as a direct challenge to the U.S.'s protectionist stance, signaling Canada's intent to assert its sovereignty and protect its economic interests. Industry Minister Mélanie Joly was instrumental in implementing the Buy Canadian policy, prioritizing local content in federal procurement whenever domestic suppliers were available. This initiative aimed to enhance Canadian businesses' access to government contracts and support, fostering economic growth and job creation, especially in sectors impacted by international competition. However, her aggressive approach faced criticism. Detractors argued that the Buy Canadian policy could lead to inefficiencies and higher costs for taxpayers, cautioning that such protectionist measures might stifle competition and hinder innovation in the long run. Despite the criticisms, Joly remained resolute in her belief that Canada needed to protect its economic interests and assert its independence on the global stage. She actively engaged with Canadian industry leaders and stakeholders to ensure that the policy was effectively implemented and that the benefits were felt across the nation. This proactive approach was aimed at countering the potential risks associated with escalating trade tensions, particularly with the United States. Critics also voiced concerns that Joly's policy could lead to retaliatory measures from the U.S., potentially igniting a trade war that could have severe repercussions for the Canadian economy. The economic measures introduced by Carney and Joly had immediate effects on Canadian households. The elimination of the consumer carbon tax resulted in a noticeable drop in gasoline prices across the country, providing much-needed relief to consumers grappling with rising living costs. Furthermore, Carney's middle-class tax cut, which promised savings of up to $840 annually for families, further eased financial pressures. Many Canadians welcomed these measures as tangible actions to address affordability concerns, and the government's approval ratings began to stabilize as a result. On the international front, Canada's strained relationship with the United States remained a focal point of Carney's foreign policy strategy. The imposition of U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods had a detrimental impact on several key sectors of the Canadian economy, including steel, aluminum, and automotive manufacturing. In response to these challenges, Carney sought to diversify Canada's trade partnerships by strengthening economic ties with Europe and Asia. This strategic pivot aimed to reduce Canada's dependence on the U.S. market and mitigate the risks associated with trade disputes. Carney's government actively pursued trade agreements with countries in the Asia-Pacific region, bolstering Canada's position as a global trading partner. Domestically, Carney's government faced the ongoing challenge of balancing economic growth with environmental sustainability. While the elimination of the consumer carbon tax signified a significant policy shift, Carney made it clear that Canada remained committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The government continued to support the output-based pricing system, OBPS, an industrial carbon pricing regime designed to incentivize emissions reductions while allowing for economic growth. Additionally, significant investments were channeled towards clean energy technologies, aiming to drive decarbonization efforts across various sectors. Carney's nuanced approach sought to align environmental objectives with economic priorities, positioning Canada as a leader in sustainable practices while fostering a resilient economy. The political landscape in Canada also experienced notable shifts as a result of these policy changes. The Liberal Party's decision to eliminate the consumer carbon tax and implement protectionist trade measures drew sharp criticism from opposition parties. They accused the government of undermining its environmental commitments and isolating Canada from international markets. However, Carney's leadership and decisive actions resonated with segments of the electorate who prioritized economic stability and national sovereignty. His ability to communicate the rationale behind the policies and their intended benefits played a crucial role in garnering public support. As Canada navigated these complex challenges, the government's focus remained on fostering economic growth, protecting Canadian industries, and ensuring that environmental policies were both effective and equitable. The leadership of Carney and Joly was under constant scrutiny, and their policies served as a barometer for the nation's future direction. The coming months were expected to bring further policy developments as they continued to address the evolving economic and geopolitical landscape. In conclusion, the actions taken by Prime Minister Mark Carney and Industry Minister Mélanie Joly in 2025 marked a significant shift from previous policies. Their focus on economic resilience, protection of domestic industries, and a balanced approach to environmental sustainability opened a new chapter in Canada's political and economic landscape. While these decisions sparked debate, they highlighted the government's commitment to addressing the complexities of a rapidly changing global environment. As Canada adapts to these challenges, the developments under Carney and Joly's leadership will likely shape political discourse and public opinion for years to come.